happy Friday morning. I know this is not the typical time that we usually get started, but I love being adaptable for my guests, especially when it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So today with me, I have Lauren. Hello, Lauren. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And if you're tuning in, please drop some comments in the comment section. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I think I did it correctly on Instagram this time. I don't know. They're weird with StreamYard. So we'll just see if it happens. If not, you can catch me on X, formerly known as Twitter, which is dumb as well, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch if you're a gamer. So check out all those channels. Lauren, we met at the Empowering Women in Industry event last year, and I was super excited to meet you. And I have to give a shout out to Charlie Matthews because I think she's one of the queens of networking and connecting people. And her event, if you haven't been to it, please look into it because they actually have another one this year in New Orleans, which I'm really excited about because I've never been before, in October. So check that out. You can go to their website and find all kinds of information, and it's just a bunch of really great women who are doing amazing things in the trades and male dominated industries. But I digress. I want to get back to Lauren. So, Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some background information and like your history of what you do?
Absolutely. So, my name is Lauren Dreher, and I am a trainer recruiter at SkillPath, as well as I do a lot of mindset and leadership speaking. As you can tell, I have recently, in the last few years, added neurodiversity into that because um, life and experience and going through it right now. Um, I host a podcast called Misfits Managed, and well, I co-host. Let me put it that way, and I've had a lot of fun with that. Um, I do lots of different things. I'm also an author, and I have a podcast to go with that as well. So, um, sort of all over the place, but comes with the territory, right?
Right. And we'll dive a little bit more into some of those things as well too. Because I do want to get some more details about your podcast, that the one that you're co-hosting, but also the one that you do in collation with your book that you wrote. And I want to talk more about your book as well too. And I gotta actually go purchase that because it sounds like a really good book. And I've been reading a lot more lately, which is weird because normally I can't focus on reading books, but I've been getting better, so that's good. We do have Hank saying good morning. Hello, Hank. Tell the ladies I said hello. I hope if they're not in school this week, I hope they're having a wonderful summer. My kids aren't done until next week, so I know all the parents are probably like not too excited if they have kids like mine who are wild animals, but that's okay. The other thing too is you did a TEDx talk,
I
correct?
did. Yes.
What was your TEDx talk on? Do you want to explain that to
Yeah.
us?
So that my common theme in like everything is go with your gut. So that was the theme of the TEDx talk, and I talked a lot about the three pillars that I really kind of focus on, which are growing through fear, finding the opportunity in difficulty, as well as shifting perspective, because it's part of everything in every season in life, and it's a simple little thing, but it's a game changer.
Yeah. And do you use those three pillars then in how you're like coaching some of these teams that you talk to? Okay, we'll get into
Yeah.
that. Okay, we'll get into each individual pillar when we get to that part of the
Yeah.
conversation. But I do want you to talk about, your book, Go With Your Gut, Then Keep Going, which I think is a fantastic title. And then, how does that tie into your podcast, Forged by Fire? Can you explain what, you know, inspires you to write this book and start the podcast?
Yeah. So when I originally kind of said, I'm gonna go be a speaker, I went and talked to my mom and said, how crazy am I? And she goes, you're not crazy. I think you'd be great, but I think you need a book to go with it. I tried writing that. It started different. I started writing that and tried to write it 3 different times. And I was like, what is wrong with me? How can I not write a book about myself? And then I went and talked to somebody else, and she goes, the book that really needs to be written writes itself. And so I came home and I was like, okay, what do I need to say? And outpours all of these things. And honestly, it was supposed to have a different title. The
Okay.
original title was Road Less Traveled, because I love that song by Lauren Elena. But
Hmm.
the more I wrote, the more I sat there and said, um, some of this stuff that I want to do has no logic to it. I don't have a background in it, but I want to try it. I want to do all of this stuff. And so I was like, no, I'm going to figure it out. Like building a website, I have no technical experience. I'm not an IT person. I don't code. Figured out how to do that. Um, just figuring out a lot of things. I had never written a book before, had no idea, started writing, and I was like, we're going to figure this out as we go. Um, and as I kind of kept just doing these things and figuring it out, I attributed it to, just listening to my gut, listening to that intuition and saying, no, this is what I
Yeah.
want to do. And so I was like, but we listen to our gut, but do we stop? No. And so the whole thing that I ended up writing about in the book was listen to your gut, listen to that instinct, and then don't stop, because life keeps going, right?
Yeah. I think that's so relatable to a lot of women in like male dominated industries too,
Yeah.
because I was at, and I don't know if you went to the one in Chicago, like the event right before the main event for the Empowering Women in Industry. Charlie brought in the author of Brave, and she talked a
Yeah.
lot about following your intuition and how to like read the signs and how to keep yourself aligned with what your purpose is. And I feel like, and this isn't just women, but I feel like when we're younger, we're more apt to like follow what our purpose is because we don't have like people telling us, do this to fit us in a box, and then as we get older, we're supposed to act or talk a certain way to kind of fit in with society and then ignore the things we like and the things we're passionate about. So I'm going to pick up your book and start reading it because I like those conversations. I think the more you can listen to what your intuition is, the better chance you have of following what your true purpose is. And then the happier it will be because when you're not doing what you love, you're kind of miserable and no one likes to be miserable. But Hank did respond. They're there until June 21st. Wow, that's a really long time. Canada does things different. That's really long. And then Amy, hey, Megan and Lauren. Hey, Amy, thank you for tuning in. Well, let's talk about neurodiversity. So, this is such an interesting topic for me because I think the first time I heard the actual term was like last year or 2 years ago, and I was at a conference. And if you were the person that was talking to me about this, please let me know because I did raise my eyebrow, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And because I didn't know, and they were
Yeah.
like, well, the term uniquely abled, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's individuals who are either autistic or have some sort of like neurological thing going on that's not the same as everybody else. And they started terming it neurodiversity. So for you, Lauren, how do you define neurodiversity?
My I don't know that I really have a strict definition. Um,
Mhm.
from everything that I've read, all my own personal research, all my own personal experiences, it is it's essentially like your thumbprint of your brain. Everybody is different.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a difference in the way that we process, the way that we think, um, the way that we react to lots of different things. And it's going to look different for everybody because I mean it's just another factor in your personality, your communication style, your work ethic, and it's going to add everything from growing up, uh, coping mechanisms if you're like us and you didn't realize you had it until later in life. And all of a sudden you're like,
Mhm.
oh, that makes sense. So it's definitely, I think, a very broad term, but I love it because it changes the perspective on the fact that it's always been labeled as a disability.
Yeah. Hmm.
But, simple and clean, it's just thinking and processing differently on different scales. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So the articles that I've been reading on it, some of the main ones that they focus on are autism,
yep,
and then dyslexia was mentioned,
yep.
ADHD was mentioned, and then the other article mentioned Down syndrome as well too. So it's just a different way. Now I have autism in my family. My nephew has it, and I appreciate him so much because he's a very direct human being and
Yep.
he just doesn't sugarcoat things, and I appreciate that so much. And he just, when people try to sugarcoat things or like sweeten it up a little bit, he gets a little confused because he's just like, well, why don't you just say it this way, because that's how it is. And I'm like, I get that, but some people can't handle the directness. And he was like, well, that's not my problem. That's like, but he's also really good at like computer stuff, so he can build his own computer. He's really good at video games. Like he loves video games, and now he wants to be a video game engineer. So when it comes to like the type of recruitment that you do, how do you tie in neurodiversity with some of the recruitment best practices that you have?
Well, it comes from personal experience, honestly, because if you look at my own resume, I had somebody comment it. I was showing it to somebody last week because they were asking about formatting their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, here you go, look at mine. And they're like, you're kind of all over the place. I said, yep, sure am. But it but it's very much of a highlight of here's all of the things that I can do. And I appreciated so much when I got hired on at SkillPath because instead of just looking at the piece of paper and saying, taking the skills for what they were asking me about it. And it was, they let me translate my experiences into how I could make it work for them, how I could make it work
Mm-hmm.
for the company. Just because I don't have this skill, well, you see, I learned this over here by doing this. So I can do this for you. However, you need to make it work for the company. And that is exactly what I get to do at SkillPath because when all of these trainers are submitting resumes and everything, all of our trainers come from drastically diverse areas, all different sorts of industries. And just for a plug, we are always looking for people from manufacturing. Um, it's very interesting because I get to look at all of their skills, their past experiences, their volunteer work, their personal interests,
Mm-hmm.
all of the different things they've done. And I was like, well, it doesn't point blank say this is what they do, but why couldn't this skill translate into being able to do this for this company? Why couldn't it do that? They've got communication skills, they've got all these other things. Oh, they love to do this in their personal time. Oh, they're very hands-on, aren't they? So being able to make that connection and kind of read between the lines a little bit and say, if you can do this, you can also probably do this. But they may be like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And honestly, being neurodiverse myself kind of brings that understanding. And I'm like, oh, do you realize this about yourself? Um, Kind of brings that understanding of why they may be like that,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody may look at them and be like, you're all over the place. Well, yeah, I got a lot of different interests, I got a lot of different talents, and it is such a skill and it's such a strength to be able to do all of those things. And it may not just be in, say one department, it may be able to bleed into other departments. And I I just, it's such an asset to be able to look at resumes and honestly see them differently than just here's a piece of paper. Oh, they don't have this one thing on there, but they've got these other things. So maybe that could be in their future.
Right. So you mentioned that you're neurodiverse yourself, and we talked about this a little bit before we got on. I do want to shout out to Whitney who joined us. Hello from Katy, Texas. Hi, Whitney. I hope you're doing well today. You mentioned that you are neurodiverse yourself. So what was that journey like for you when you found out? And like, how do how has it helped you since you've been diagnosed, like kind of refocus where you were struggling in certain areas?
Well, honestly, it was a relief
Mm-hmm.
because um, growing up, I I remember telling my mom that I thought I was stupid because I was like, I can't focus, I can't pay attention, I can't learn. Well, yeah, when the teacher's standing at the front of the room and just talking at me, my brain wanders. Yeah, I'm not going to learn a dang thing by doing that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so my my room was always a mess. I There's a lot of different things. I get distracted really easy. Um, Lose my train of thought, as you can see. Um, and I I am one of the people that I have to have something in front of me if I want to remember doing it, to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I have my clutter that may or may not drive some people crazy. But um, I just kind of dealt with it and it was what it was. Well, then finally when somebody connected those dots for me and I'm like, yes, I do all that. Yes, I do all that. Um, and finally, when I went to get screened and diagnosed, and he sat there and said, yeah, absolutely. And all of a sudden, the dots connected. And I was like, this is why I couldn't focus. This is why I couldn't pay attention. Um, this is why this explains so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was kind of like in the back of my head, I knew there was something there. And so it was like this little, like, character running around in a mask being like, yeah, I'm here. And then once I figured it out, it was like, okay, well, you now know this is here. And so it was almost kind of like a flood of, now that I know all of this, now how do I shift gears and learn to manage it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't on medication. Um, I was trying to figure out how to um, kind of control. energy, because there's a time of day I when that creative flow for me comes much more naturally.
Yeah.
And then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, why can I not function? Like I have all of this stuff happening and, I got balls pinging all over the place in my head. So then I, get to the end of the day and I'm like, why am I just done?
You're like drained.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the more well, honestly, I didn't want to get on medication because I didn't want to get on medication. And I ended up doing it, and it's been a game changer for me. And
Mhm.
then I just kind of started paying attention to myself, and I'm like, okay, um, what do I need to do for myself to be able to be good for the rest of the day? Um, I I have two small boys who are crazy and loud and all over the place, and
I
um,
can relate to that.
yeah, yeah. So in order to not want to just blow up at them all of the time, I'm like, okay, I gotta ground myself in the morning. Um, I gotta, have my very specific morning routine so that when everybody else gets up, I'm not like already completely scattered. And then I just kind of started building tools, and the other big thing for me was um, knowing what kind of environment I needed, and
Mhm.
um, knowing the boundaries that I needed to set and enforcing them. When I say that, I mean I have to work in silence or else I don't function. If I'm in a group collaboration, I can do that
Mhm.
just fine. But if I need to sit down and focus myself on what I'm doing, it has to be quiet or else I'm listening to whatever is going on in the background. And I'm like, ooh, I want to pay attention to that. Meanwhile, I'm staring at my computer screen, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because I have like the opposite where if I'm in a room by myself and I need to focus on a task, I have to have some noise in the background, whether it's the TV or whether it's like music or something. I can't like so for those of you tuning in, and Whitney said neurodiverse power, yes. So those
Yep.
of you tuning in, one of the things that I mentioned in earlier post, so I am getting assessed for ADHD. My therapist is the one that actually picked up on some signs, and my son Ronan is actually getting assessed, and he is definitely a yes. Because like I looked at the screening that his teacher did, and then compared it to mine, and he's definitely a yes. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like he just looks at things differently, and if he's bored, he's not going to be happy. Like he has to be constantly stimulated, and things that spin, like anything. I think he's going to get into cars and engineering just because he's obsessed with them. And I think this is a really good conversation, especially when it comes to workforce development and manufacturing specifically, because um, neurodivergent individuals are known to be really good at analyzing data. I know that's not on your list of things, but they're also good at problem solving and pattern recognition and attention to detail. And some of them do like those repetitive tasks. So if it's like CNC machining, for instance, is a really good thing for some people who might be on the autism spectrum because it's like a repetitive task and it requires focus, and that's what they like. So we have comments coming in. I'm an ADHD or two, can totally relate. And then
Yes.
I'm with Lauren. I can't focus with noise on. I'll even put my noise canceling headphones on with nothing playing at times. That's interesting that you mentioned that, Hank, because one of the articles that I read about neurodiversity, they were giving suggestions on what businesses can do to really help neurodivergent individuals focus and be
Yep.
successful at their job. So, Lauren, I wanted to ask you at SkillPath, do you guys have like suggestions for companies when they're hiring neurodivergent individuals to help them get set up for success? Like, do you offer that kind of advice to companies?
Um, we are, I believe, in the midst of getting that together. Our teams do a lot of market research and all of that. So I believe that's in the works. But I will tell you from a personal standpoint, some of the girls on my team have uh, since had this discovery. One of the other girls I work with is very much in your space. She's got to have something going in the background. Um, she's got to have all that stuff going. My husband, who is in construction, is also an ADHDer, and he has to have something playing in the background. He is also very good into all the little projects and woodworking and all of that, and very handy.
Mhm.
And he's got to be doing something as well. Um, but I will say it's just a matter of asking everybody, each individual, what works for them, because um, I didn't know at first when I was hired on at SkillPath that I needed that. I knew I worked better, but I didn't really understand why in silence. And then
Mhm.
I figured that out, and I was like, okay, I need my own little space. I need to be able to shut the door when I need to shut the door and be in silence if you want me to focus, if you want me to be get better production. Um, I have 3 million little fidgets. This is just my rubber band, but I always keep it on my wrist because no matter really what I'm doing, where I'm at, you'll see me sitting here playing with it. Um,
Don't give me a straw wrapper.
oh my gosh, you and my husband, yes, yes. Um, and the other interesting thing, I think, to deal with the workforce, and my husband and I have had a conversation about this, him and I, before, and I think it's interesting because he and I are very, very different, but we are the same in this, in that if we're in a meeting, um, well, maybe I'll change that. If we're just in a conversation, maybe not a meeting, but if we're talking, as you see my eyes darting around, um,
Mhm.
if I'm talking about something a lot of times, I'm not going to make eye contact with you because I'm connecting the dots for myself and I'm drawing that picture in my head. And so if you're talking to me and telling me and describing me something to me, it's the exact same way. I'll look off in the distance. I will look somewhere else because I'm connecting those dots and drawing that picture in my head of what you're telling me. It's not has nothing to do with um, being inattentive. Now, that said, does my mind wander and will I veer off for a minute? Yes, but I've had to start voicing that at the beginning, like, hey, if I don't look at you, it has nothing to do with me not listening. It's I'm listening, but I'm drawing that picture of what you're telling me in my mind so that I can understand it how I understand it. Um, if somebody asks me for ideas in a meeting, I can probably come up with some, but
Mhm.
I come up with a lot more if you let me go back to my office, hang out for a minute, and then um, like finish out that creative process. And I'm like, hey, did you ever think of this? Can we do this? Would this ever work? And like it just starts shooting off because I've had some time to process that and think about how it would work, how it could work. And then adding that into
Mhm.
the whole team collaboration, and then everybody else starts saying, oh, yeah, this could work, this could work. So it's really a matter of understanding each person, how they work, how they process, and how they come up with ideas.
Yeah,
Um, I have to talk it out. My husband does the opposite. He has to sit there and internalize it and work through it and connect those dots for himself.
that's interesting. I think the comment about the no eye contact, real quick though, Hank Priam, I'm with Lauren. I can't focus with noise on. I'll even put my noise canceling headphones on with nothing playing at times. I think I already read that comment. See, Whitney said it depends on what type of work I'm doing. Sometimes I need music in the background to help me focus. Other times I have to work in silence. I'm the same way, Whitney. Like most of the time, though, it's with music. Like I really need something, because silence can be too loud for me. And then 100. I used to work in an open office environment, and it was awful. I've worked in that type of environment as well too, but I had to put my headphones on and play music as loud as I could in my ear, because if I could hear the conversations around me, I would get involved with the conversations and then forget about what I was working on. So this assessment that I'm going to do is going to be very interesting because I just feel like it's going to be a yes for me, which is going to explain a lot about how I react and act in certain situations.
Yep.
So there's an article that you sent, or no, I think I sent you the SME one. But so SME wrote an article about neurodiversity, and it's actually a really good article. I'm going to actually copy and paste the link into the comments. But it talks about some of the things that you can do to really set neurodivergent individuals up and what managers can do. So this is to all the headphone listeners. Allow noise canceling headphones if safe, even if not required. Then they said establish communication methods that work for the employee, such as providing written instructions. Provide checklists for job tasks. I'm one of those people. I have to have a checklist all the time. Create and use training content in verbal, written, and video format. Schedule
Yep.
shifts consistently. Provide clear, regular, and consistent feedback on performance, and then give access to an employment coach or outside mentor, which I think is really, really cool. And the other interesting thing, in one of the articles you sent me, there was an individual who said he didn't get diagnosed until much later because he actually had his sons tested for autism, and then he noticed that he was doing some of the same behavior that they were doing. So then he got tested, and they finally diagnosed him. And women generally are diagnosed much later on in life too, because
Yep.
there's just something where we just, I guess it's not as obvious that we could be autistic, which is, I don't know why, what the difference is, but
Yeah.
I think if people can just show up and be like, okay, hey, this is what's going on with me, and they can feel comfortable about it, it really helps provide that positive work environment. So make sure you read that article, because I think it would be really helpful for people to know. I've talked to a lot of engineers within this sector, and I'm pretty sure a lot of them are neurodivergent just because they fit
Yeah.
a lot of these signs. So I do want to talk about, you say you look at a lot of resumes, and we kind of went over some of the skill sets that neurodivergent individuals can bring to a work environment. But what truly are the benefits for neurodiverse individuals being involved in the workforce? Like, what are some of the things that they bring to the table that others just don't bring?
I don't necessarily know if it's others don't bring it. Uh, I think it's just a diff a different version, honestly. Um, because neurodivergent individuals just have a different way of looking at things, a different way of connecting things. Um, they, like, as far as maybe patterns and processes and um, honestly, so many other things, which um, I am not obviously in the manufacturing, engineering, anything field, but um, my most of my family is. So I do understand it from that aspect,
Mhm.
and just being able to be hands-on, making things more efficient, um, being able to provide maybe new creative and innovative ideas. Um, and I think it gets overlooked because if you're neurodivergent, you don't necessarily understand that not everybody thinks the way you do.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's like you say something and you're like, oh, you like nobody else thought of that. Um, and so we just assumed that everybody else would have the same connections, the same
Yeah.
ideas. And then you voice it thinking, well, what the heck? All they can do is tell me no. And all of a sudden, it's like fireworks and light bulbs start going off. And you're like, oh, okay. That I'm just the one thinking about that um, because their neurons fire differently and their brains just work differently. Um, so just being able to add that. I mean, it's kind of like did you say your nephew is?
Yeah, my nephew has I want to say it's Asperger's, but I'm not,
Okay.
don't quote me on that. But he's high functioning and
Yeah.
he's very verbal, like, but he's
Yeah.
very brutally honest is what we would call it. And he's just like, it's just common sense. And he
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, the hell's wrong with you, Megan? And I'm like, not everybody's going to like the directness there, Miles. And he is like, that's not my problem. And I'm like, okay, like, I appreciate you. But he's very good at
Yeah.
like visual things and putting things together. And
Yes.
it's just kind of funny because when others people just don't get it, he just looks at them like,
Why
okay.
don't you get this? Exactly, because he doesn't get that not everybody puts things together that way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think, like, it's always been labeled as the diagnosis because it was so misunderstood. And
Mhm.
a lot of times people didn't know how to communicate that because they're just like, why doesn't everybody see it like this? Or we were just brushed off because we had a disability instead of I, I have this other way of thinking that is going to bring your company a lot of innovation. I'm going to bring some new ideas. Do I have to do things differently? Yeah, but let
Yeah,
me, let me,
I hate the word disability because I think it sets people up to be
yeah,
limited. And it's just
yeah,
it doesn't allow them to really be at their full potential. And
yeah.
like one of the things that the article mentioned as neurodivergent is Down syndrome. And I just remember a
Mhm.
long time ago, if that was such a negative thing. And there's still kind of like a negative thing around Down syndrome, and it's just so sad. Like when I was pregnant with my son Declan, he was showing signs of being Downs, and I just remember they pulled me into an office and they brought up, and I'm not trying to have this conversation up as a political debate. Like I'm just saying
Yeah,
my personal experience, so I hope no one gets offended. But they brought up abortion and they were like, you can terminate the pregnancy. And I just looked at him and I'm like, why the hell would I do that? Like, I was just so confused as why they were presenting this as an
yeah,
option. And I'm like, if he has Down syndrome, he has Down syndrome. That's the way he's supposed to be. Like, I'm not going to terminate my pregnancy because of that. Like it caught me off
Yeah.
guard because I was just like,
Yeah.
I have a healthy baby.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, he might have Down. So here's your options. And I'm like, what? And I left the office just bawling. And my mom's like, what's
Oh,
wrong? And I'm like, they brought up this. She's just
yeah.
like, what? So it was just weird.
Yeah.
But I do want to get to these comments. Whitney said diagnosed
Yeah.
later because the typical stereotypical symptoms are from studying men and boys, not women. I think that's a fair
Good
point. Like
point.
we're different. So yeah, it's not kind of a fair comparison. And then Josh Williams on YouTube said, definitely have the eye contact issue because I'm mentally trying to both comprehend what you're saying and figuring out how to
Yes.
verbalize my response. And then he said, diagnosed ADHD about 5 years ago, 20-year engineer. So Josh and
Yep.
Whitney, like, also a lot of women have internalized hyperactivity, which others can't see. I think that's me.
See?
So, Josh and Whitney, like, if you want to comment too, like, on how you cope with things, how you coped with things before your diagnosis, and then what things you changed after a diagnosis, I think that would be helpful too, because again, I feel like you said, Lauren, it's just a part of who you are. So you're not going to think that
Yep.
there's something off, or even like there isn't anything off. It's just how you are. But then once
Yep.
you were able to figure out, okay, now I can get more work done because I can focus on these things and then maybe adjust certain things so that if I need to take a break or whatever. And then I think that's good for employers to know too. So Whitney and Josh, if you want to like share stories within your work environments, let us know. Or if you have tips as well too, put those in the comments because I think this is a really good conversation. So one of the things that you have on your profile, Lauren, is that you help teams come together and make them better at thriving and being more collaborative, which can also lead to better innovation. So do you have like best practices that you go through with teams? I know earlier in the conversation you mentioned those 3 pillars. So do you want to kind of like take a deep dive in each of those pillars for us?
Yeah. So really, I think it kind of comes down to um, a couple of different things. And that is the fact that everybody on teams is an individual. We all come from different backgrounds. And one of the biggest things I've seen is whether everybody does the same thing or you have a team of everybody has a different job duty for whatever reason, whatever they do,
Mm-hmm.
it's they all have a different way of doing things. They have a different way of thinking about things, and they're different people. And I think for me anyway, the way I'm like, all right, well, I think sometimes it gets overgeneralized of, oh, we all do the same thing, so it should be done the same way, which for consistency and standard operating procedures, yes. Um, but for the people on my team, I don't think about things the same way that they do.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is much more um, analytical, and I am analytical in my own way, they're analytical in other ways, but we're going to do things different. So I think team building honestly is huge. And I know that that's not necessarily part of um, production, but it will make your production better because on my team, we have a chat and we've all gotten to know each other personally. Yes, there are
Mm-hmm.
some fine lines there, but we've gotten to know each other personally. So everybody knows how I am, my strengths. Everybody knows everybody else's strengths, what they're good at. And so when we all know that, it's, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And you combine those talents and we just do it naturally because we've gotten to know each other.
Yeah.
And like we don't hang out of work, but we have personal conversations and we are open about how we work, why we are the way we are, um, all of those things. And when you have those conversations and you know your teams, you know their strengths, instead of just saying, I hired this person for X skill, it's knowing how they work. Because honestly, some of the things that have absolutely zero things to do with my job are huge contributing factors to making me good at my job.
Hmm.
Um, some of the creativity, some of the things that I enjoy outside of work make me even better at my job. And if you can get that to happen in your teams, if you can um, assign projects maybe to a certain person, figure out what their interests are, what their passions are, and say, how can you relate that to your work? What do you like to
Yeah.
do? What puts you in that happy space? What gets you in that creative flow? Because creative flow might be organizing. Creative
Right.
flow might be um, programming, computer programming.
Hmm.
Talked to somebody the other day and I was like, oh, your happy place is Salesforce. Okay, that's not me, but okay. Um,
No thanks.
yeah, but what a skill to a company to be able to say, this is my happy place. Like they're going to be a huge asset to any team who needs help personalizing Salesforce for them, you know?
Yeah.
So really, like sometimes it's difficult to find good teams, good employees, because you get a whole plethora of people who are applying, but finding the opportunity and the difficulty of um, the process, and when you have somebody who you're having a problem with, maybe change the perspective on how they work, what they do, the environment that they're in, because that could make all the difference for me.
Yeah.
Uh, Getting to know your team and getting your team to know your team is huge, as well as knowing their communication styles and respecting that, as well as um, uh, respecting boundaries, understanding how they communicate, because we've talked a couple times about how neurodiversity can make people very direct. It's also me.
Hmm.
I've learned to filter it a little bit, but that's one of the conversations that I have with people when I first meet them. Also, I'm like, I tend to be very direct. I don't mean it to be, um, I don't mean to be rude or any of those things, but please know that about me.
I've been told to soften my edges.
Yeah, yeah.
What
Um,
does that mean?
but all of those things I think are huge in companies getting their teams to thrive, because if you can show your teams how to mesh their skills with everybody else's and then provide them the environment that gets them to thrive, instead of just
Yeah.
saying, it is what it is, deal with it. Well, I can't deal with it if you put me in a really crowded room. It won't happen because I
Right.
can't focus. Do I want to? Yes. Can I? No.
Right. I think that's a good point though, because one of the articles too is talking about like how you can change the interview process. So
Yeah.
if you can just be authentic and transparent up from the jump, some people might not be able to do an interview in a room that has a window where people are constantly
Yeah.
walking by. Like they might need a closed room where
Yeah.
it's quiet so that they can stay focused and not be distracted by whatever's going on around them. I've had that happen to me before where I was just
Yeah.
like, can we move to a different room, like I'm not understanding any of your questions because I'm paying attention to everything else around me. And they were kind
Yeah.
of like, what the hell? And but they understood like, oh, okay, yeah. Like I wanted to focus on the interview. So I think if you can just be authentic, but again, it's gonna have to start at the top of the leadership and
Yep.
then be the whole company. And I always say this too, like employees have a responsibility to kind of research the companies they think they want to work at. And if it's not a compatible place for them, like if it doesn't align with their core values, like don't
Don't do it.
apply there because you're just going to be miserable. Josh said I have to be careful about hyper focus, which can be very helpful but leads to burnout.
Yep.
Yes, I think I'm guilty of that as well. Like there's days where I'll work so many hours just because I want to get things done, and then I'm burnt out the rest of the week. Like I have to stop doing that. Wendy said I wasn't diagnosed until after having my son. All the changes that come with having kids brought it to the forefront and made my life seem unmanageable.
Me
Before
too.
having my son, I believe I was able to manage because I had a lot of downtime, quiet time, and solid routine. I was also good at masking. After diagnosis, I've been on medication and anxiety, which has been a big help for me. Though what has made the greatest difference is ADHD coaching. Oh, that allowed me to build a community. That's interesting.
I think Whitney
Maybe
and I are like the same person.
maybe put the coaching resource and the links for other people to
Yeah,
maybe look into because I didn't even know there was ADHD coaching.
there
Um,
is. Yep.
that's awesome. So let's get into these three pillars real quick because we have
Yeah.
like 8 minutes left. But can you like rename them and just kind of go
Yeah.
over how you use them in your work
Yeah.
environment?
So the first one is growing through fear. And Whitney mentioned anxiety. I also have very high anxiety, and it adds to a lot of fear of what's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen if I say this? What's going to happen if I try this? And what's going to happen if you don't is you're going to stay complacent. You're going to be miserable.
Mm,
So, getting past that fear of the unknown and what's going to happen if I try this and it doesn't work out. Okay, it doesn't work out and you move on to something else. But
mhm,
there's such a fear aspect, which in my mind is a good thing. You have fear, it means you're doing big things. You're getting out of your comfort zone. So, I talk a lot about fear in the fact that if you're doing things, if you're expanding yourself, fear is going to come in. You got to learn how your body reacts to that and figure out how to be friends with it instead of it being this big red monster in the back.
I
Um,
like that.
Opportunity and difficulty. Whenever we're faced with difficulties, there's always opportunity that comes with it. And a lot of times I find that um, life is going to throw us some huge challenges in order to get us to stretch, in order to get to where we need to go next. It's going to teach us what we need to handle the next stage of life. And is it hard? Does it hurt? Is it going to stress us out? Yeah, probably. But being able to say, where's the opportunity in this? What can I learn from this? How can my leaderships, my personal skills, all of that grow with this? And then shifting perspective because we tend to get ourselves in a little bit of a bubble. We tend to want to keep one lens on. And I've had a lot of conversations of, well, I see what you're saying, but did you think about it like this? Um, did you think about it in terms of this is what they may have been saying? They may have been trying to be helpful. And, something happens that triggers me, that makes me mad. And I'm like, okay, that's my own problem. They weren't meaning to make me mad. They're just putting something out there. And just shifting perspective on it, sort of like shifting fear into being a good thing. It means you're moving, it means you're growing. Um, shifting perspective on, heck, let's say neurodiversity, and the fact that, is it labeled as a diagnosis? Yes. Can it be a hell of a strength to your company and your teams? 100%. You just have to have the right perspective in order to um, see it the right way, and to say, oh, just these couple things, and I could have somebody that's gonna um, be the next Steve Jobs, be the next um, Elon Musk, be all these people
Yeah.
who are kind of throwing the rule book out the window, right? And saying, let me shift your perspective. I'm going to do this anyway, and look where we can get things.
Yeah. I like that. I feel like the first pillar that you were talking about with fear, it sounds a lot like that imposter syndrome that a lot of, and
Yeah,
I'm not saying men don't suffer from imposter syndrome, but women seem to be more vocal about it. And I'm just like, we got to get rid of that term, because again, I think you made a good point. When we are scared of something, it's pushing our boundaries, and it means that those are opportunities for growth. So
yep,
how do we push forward with it? And I think self-reflection is really important in those moments. And
yep,
then the other thing is, change your perspective. I think that's a really good point on how we need to relearn how to have crucial conversations, because
yes,
with digital technology, I feel like everybody thinks and takes things very personally. It's kind of like this victimhood thing where we just take a lot of things personally now, and oh, they must be mad at me. And you don't know if they are going through something horrible themselves, and maybe that's why they're coming across the
yeah,
wrong way. Maybe they're having a bad day, and you just don't know. So one of the books that I always suggest people to read is Crucial Conversations, because it does give a ton of good tips and best practices on how to step outside of your own personal perspective and look at things in a different way, so that you can approach a conversation with less stress and less conflict, and
yes.
kind of be neutral in those conversations. Whitney is leaving a ton of information. She said, yes, my coach is actually having a free info session soon on June 5th. So anyone that wants to learn about ADHD coaching, there's a link. She's also putting up on Instagram the upcoming info session. These will be in the comments on LinkedIn. Well, maybe not YouTube, because she's commenting on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn, look at the comments. I'll share them across the other ones. And then she said, Tina is great. I've been working with her for 1.5 years and have formed wonderful friendships with other professional women. Highly recommend. Well, thank you, Whitney, for sharing those resources. I really appreciate it. Lauren, before I let you go, I always want to give people, my guests, a time to ask one of their big asks for our audience. So if you had one ask for our audience, what would your big ask be for them?
My big ask would be, use neurodiversity as an asset, and find ways to make it an asset, and then be vocal about it. Nothing is going to happen, nothing is going to change if we don't make it known. It is starting to become that way, but there's a lot of work to be done. Um, and I'm always happy to talk to people about it. So hit me up if you need to.
I'm gonna drop these links in the comments section too, to the articles. I'm just gonna drop all three. I know I posted one before, but we're just gonna do it again. That's okay. It's okay to have things twice.
Yep.
But they have really good information. One of them is from SME as well too. They're a really great organization within engineering. So be sure to follow those links. Read up on neurodiversity. If you are a company that wants to figure out how to attract more neurodivergent individuals, those are really good resources as well too. And I know if you reach out to SME, they are more than helpful to helping people. But Lauren, if people have any more questions for you or want to connect with you and have a conversation, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
hit me up on LinkedIn. That is the easiest way. Lauren Dreher.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, thank you so much. I hope to see you again at this year's Empowering Women in Industry event. For those of you who don't know, it's a great organization that brings women and men together in the trades and male-dominated industries, and we just have a blast. And it's in New Orleans this year. I believe it's October 10th this year. So check out that website. And then if you're having a hard time putting an edge to your text and your content, look up Z-Ink Solutions. Yes, this is my shameless self-plug. I have a video on that, but it's just a fun way to add some pizzazz to your writing and any of your content that you're generating. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. It is Memorial Weekend for us here in the United States, so enjoy that long break, and I will see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z-Ink Solutions. Z-Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zinkSolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.